I didn't hear crying when I woke up. I heard the sound of a chair scraping across linoleum, and then the soft, impatient click of someone's heels pacing near the window. That was it. No gasping. No thank God. No one reaching for my hand. I had been in that hospital bed for 11 days. 11 days with a ventilator doing the breathing. My lungs had forgotten how to do after the accident on the 401. A transport truck had run a red light just east of Kingston, and my little Civic never had a chance. The paramedics who pulled me out said it was a miracle I survived at all. I didn't feel like a miracle. I felt like a woman who had just woken up to the sound of her own husband checking his phone. I knew I was awake. I could feel the sheet against my skin, stiff and over-laundered the way hospital sheets always are. I could feel the dull throb in my left side, where 3 ribs had cracked clean through. I could feel the light through my eyelids, that pale winter afternoon light that comes through institutional windows in Ontario and makes everything look slightly gray. But I did not open my eyes. I don't know exactly why I didn't. Something stopped me. Some animal instinct, quiet and cold, that said, wait. So I waited. His name was Liam. Liam Hartwell, 41 years old, my husband of 9 years. We had met at a fundraising gala for a children's hospital in Toronto. Ironic, I know, when I was 29 and he was 32, and he had a way of standing in a room like he owned the floor beneath his feet. I had thought that was confidence. I had admired it. It took me years to understand the difference between confidence and entitlement. And by the time I did, I had already signed a marriage certificate and moved into his house in Oakville, and folded most of my own ambitions into smaller and smaller shapes to fit inside the life he had already designed. My name is Fiona. Fiona Hartwell née Calloway, 38 years old. Former marketing director at a mid-sized consulting firm in Mississauga, until Liam suggested, gently, then persistently, then in ways that made it easier to agree than to argue, that it would be better for the family if I stepped back from full-time work. We didn't even have children. The family he meant was him. When I stepped back, I brought money with me. Not Liam's money, mine. An inheritance from my grandmother, Doris Calloway, who had spent her whole life quietly accumulating a property portfolio in Prince Edward County that none of us had known the full value of until she died. When the estate was settled, my share came to just over $1.2 million. I put it into a joint investment account because Liam said it made more financial sense, and because I trusted him, and because I was 34 years old and still believed that love was the same thing as safety. I was lying very still in that hospital bed, remembering all of this, when the heels stopped pacing and I heard another voice. The doctor said she could be in this state for weeks, maybe longer. It was a woman's voice, younger than Liam's. I placed it within half a second. Vanessa Hartwell, 29 years old, Liam's younger sister. She had never liked me. Not from the first Christmas dinner, when I had accidentally used the wrong salad fork, or whatever it was that I had done wrong that night. And she had looked at me across the table with that particular expression that rich families reserve for people they consider to be almost good enough. The neurologist used the word indefinite, Liam said. He did not sound distressed. He sounded like a man discussing a parking ticket. Okay, Vanessa said. So, what's the timeline looking like? There was a pause. I heard him shift in the chair. I spoke to Mitchell. Mitchell Reeves, 45. Their family's estate lawyer. I had met him exactly twice, both times at Christmas. Both times he had looked at me the way Vanessa did. And? Vanessa asked. He says with a durable power of attorney, I can move on the accounts without waiting for probate. The issue is the joint investment account has her name as co-holder. I need her signature to liquidate, or she needs to be declared incapacitated. Silence. Liam. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. If the neurologist's assessment is already pointing toward no meaningful recovery. He hasn't said that yet, but if he does, or if we found someone who would. I stopped breathing. Not as a choice. My body just stopped, for 3 full seconds, while the words rearranged themselves into something I could understand. They were going to find a doctor to declare me beyond recovery. They were going to use that to take $1.2 million that my grandmother had left me. And they were having this conversation 6 feet from where I was lying. The ventilator breathed for me. I let it. I kept my face completely slack, the way it had been, and I listened to my husband and his sister discuss the logistics of erasing me, while the afternoon light faded to gray outside the window. And somewhere down the hall a call bell rang, and nobody answered it. I want to explain something, because I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, why didn't you open your eyes right then? Why didn't you call out, or pull out the IV, or press the call button that was clipped to the rail of the bed? I'll tell you why. Because I had nothing. No proof. No recording. No witness. If I had opened my eyes in that moment, Liam would have smiled his particular smile. The one that reached his eyes just enough to be convincing. And he would have said something like, "Sweetheart, you're confused. You must have been dreaming. The medication does that." And Vanessa would have agreed. And Mitchell Reeves would have drafted something that made my confusion part of the medical record. I knew this man. I knew exactly how he operated, because I had watched him operate on other people for 9 years, and I had always been grateful it wasn't directed at me. I had been wrong about that, so I did not open my eyes. I breathed the slow, even breaths of someone unconscious, and I started making a plan. The nurse who took the night shift was named Donna. I know this because I heard the day nurse, a man with a quiet voice and rubber-soled shoes, say, "Donna's covering tonight. I already updated the chart before he left." Donna came in around 7 p.m. I could tell she was different from the moment she walked through the door. She moved with efficiency, not haste, and she hummed something faintly under her breath while she checked the equipment. She tucked the sheet tighter around my feet and said quietly, more to herself than to me, "There you go, sweetheart." Nobody else had said that to me in 11 days. I waited until Liam left. He left at 7:45. I heard him tell Donna he'd be back in the morning, heard the particular way his coat swished when he stood, heard his footsteps down the hall. I waited another 10 minutes after that until the floor was quiet. Then I opened my eyes. The light was dim. Donna was sitting at the small station just outside my room, visible through the glass panel in the door. I turned my head, slowly, and looked at the call button. I pressed it. She came in quickly. When she saw my eyes open, she stopped in the doorway for a fraction of a second. Then she was at my side, checking pupils, checking vitals, saying, "Can you hear me? Can you squeeze my hand?" I squeezed. Hard. She called the on-call neurologist. His name was Dr. Fernandez, and he arrived within 20 minutes, and after 45 minutes of assessment he told me, in plain and careful language, that I had regained consciousness, that my neurological function appeared to be intact, and that this was, by any clinical measure, a remarkable recovery. I asked him something before he left. I asked him to put "limited family contact, patient request" in my chart, effective immediately. He looked at me for a moment. I don't know what he saw in my face, but he nodded. "I'll note it," he said. "We'll discuss it more in the morning." After he left, Donna came to take my blood pressure. She worked quietly, and I looked at the ceiling, and after a moment I said very quietly, "My husband was in here earlier. Before your shift. He's been in every day," she said, carefully neutral. "Did he speak to you? Ask you anything?" A pause. "He asked me last week how the neurological assessments usually go, what they look for, what the criteria are for declaring a patient, his word, beyond meaningful recovery." I closed my eyes for a second. "I have a favor to ask you," I said. "I'm a nurse," she said. "Not a lawyer. I know. I'm not asking for anything that crosses a line. I just need someone to help me make a phone call, tonight, without it going through the room phone." She looked at me for a long moment. She asked, "My own lawyer." Her name was Rebecca Osei, 43, partner at a firm in downtown Toronto that specialized in family and estates law. I had hired her 3 years ago for an unrelated matter, a boundary dispute with a neighbor, resolved quickly, and kept her number in my phone, which Donna retrieved from the drawer beside my bed where the nurses had stored my personal effects. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night when I called her. She answered on the third ring, and when I told her what I had heard, she was silent for approximately 4 seconds. Then she said, "Are you physically safe right now?" I said I was. "All right," she said. "Don't tell him you're awake." "Not yet. I wasn't planning to." "Good. I'm going to need you to do a few things." First, she walked me through it. Systematic, clear, no drama. That was the thing about Rebecca. She did not perform urgency, she simply moved through it. By the time we hung up, 40 minutes later, I had given her verbal authorization to begin an emergency application to sever the joint investment account, triggered by my status as co-holder. She also told me to request that the hospital flag any external inquiries about my neurological status. "Can they do that?" I asked. "You're a patient who has just regained consciousness and is expressing concerns about your financial safety. The hospital has an obligation. Yes, they can do that." The next morning, Liam arrived at 9:15. I heard his voice at the nursing station before I heard his footsteps. I was ready. I let my eyes fall almost closed. Not fully, just enough that in the low morning light, in the way someone looks when they're drifting in and out, it was not obvious whether I was awake or not. He came to the side of the bed. He sat down. He looked at me for a while. I could feel his gaze the way you can feel sunlight when your eyes are closed. A warmth that is also a kind of pressure. "Fiona," he said softly. I let my face do nothing. He picked up my hand, held it. He was very good at this part, at the gestures that looked like tenderness. I had been fooled by those gestures for years. "Mitchell's coming by this afternoon," he said quietly, as if he were talking to someone who couldn't hear him. "We just need to sort out a few things, make sure everything is taken care of." He set my hand back down. I waited until he was gone. Then I pressed the call button and asked to see Dr. Fernandez. What followed was 8 days of the most demanding performance of my life. Rebecca worked quickly and without interruption. Within 48 hours, the joint investment account had been flagged by the financial institution on her instruction, pending my direct authorization for any transactions. Mitchell Reeves called the hospital, twice asking for a neurological update. The hospital told him patient information was not available to be shared with non-designated contacts. He called Rebecca's firm directly on the third day, and she told me afterward that he had been noticeably rattled. Liam's visits continued. I maintained the same level of non-responsiveness. Eyes almost closed, breathing even, occasional small movements that looked involuntary. Donna covered 3 of the 8 night shifts, and on the evenings she worked. She kept me updated on anything she had observed. She also, without being asked, started keeping a personal record of who came in and when, and what they said within earshot of my room. She told me she was doing it just to have it. I did not ask her to do that. I will be grateful for it for the rest of my life. On the 6th day, Vanessa came alone. She stood at the foot of my bed. I could feel her there. That particular quality of attention that feels like assessment. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, not lowering her voice at all, "I don't know if you can hear me, but I want you to know that this isn't personal, it's just money. And you were never really part of this family anyway." I kept my face completely still. "The account will be unfrozen eventually," she said. "Our lawyer says there are ways around a hold, it just takes time." She left. I lay in the dark for a while, alone, and thought about every dinner I had sat through at the Hartwell family table, trying to belong to something that had never wanted me. Then I picked up Donna's phone and called Rebecca. "I'm ready," I said. "Are you sure?" she said. "Record it," I said. "All of it. What I need you to understand is that I did not plan what happened next out of anger. I want to be clear about that. Anger is hot and fast and makes you sloppy, and I could not afford to be sloppy. What I planned from that hospital bed was cold and exact and took every piece of focus I had, and I did it because I had no other option. Because the system that should have protected me, marriage, partnership, shared life, had been quietly dismantled by someone who smiled while he did it, and the only way to hold him accountable was to let him walk far enough into the trap that there was no walking back. Rebecca had filed, in addition to the emergency account flag, an application to have Liam's power of attorney revoked on grounds of financial abuse, a provision under Ontario's Substitute Decisions Act. She had also contacted a colleague at a firm that handled civil litigation, because what Liam and Vanessa had been discussing constituted, at minimum, attempted financial elder and disability abuse under the Ontario legislation. It didn't matter that I wasn't elderly. The statute covered anyone with a defined disability, including someone who had recently been on a ventilator and was legally considered medically vulnerable. Mitchell Reeves had, in the meantime, been busy. He had prepared documentation asserting my incapacity. He had found a physician, not affiliated with my hospital, not someone who had ever examined me, who was prepared to provide an opinion. Rebecca had flagged this to the College of Physicians and Surgeons. On the 8th day, I asked Dr. Fernandez to discharge me. He looked at me carefully. "You're ready physically, but is there a plan in place?" "Yes," I said. "There is." The plan was this. A friend from my years before Liam, a woman named Charlotte, who lived in the Glebe neighborhood in Ottawa, was driving to Kingston that morning to pick me up. She did not know Liam. She was not in any of his networks. Her house was the safest place I could think of, outside of Oakville, outside of Toronto, outside of everything Liam knew. Rebecca met me there 3 days later. She had a folder 4 centimeters thick. She set it on Charlotte's kitchen table, made herself a cup of tea, and walked me through every piece of it. The emergency account freeze had held. The $1.2 million was intact. The physician Mitchell had recruited had, under investigation by the college, quietly withdrawn his opinion. Mitchell himself was now facing a complaint to the Law Society of Ontario. And Liam had retained a criminal defense lawyer. Because Rebecca's colleague had filed a formal complaint with the OPP's Financial Crimes Unit, and there were investigators who wanted to speak with him. I sat at Charlotte's kitchen table in an oversized sweater she had lent me, my ribs still aching, my left hand still slightly numb from nerve damage, and I read through every page of that folder. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Rebecca said, "you make some decisions. I won't pretend the next several months were simple. They weren't. Divorce proceedings in Ontario take time, and Liam hired a lawyer who was very good at slowing things down. There were hearings and delays, and more than one morning when I sat in Charlotte's spare bedroom, listening to the Ottawa winter outside the window, and thought about all the years I had spent making myself smaller to fit inside someone else's idea of what my life should look like. But here is what I want to tell you, because I think it matters. The money was mine again within 90 days. Rebecca had the account fully separated and transferred to a solo account in my name, under court order, before the first round of divorce proceedings even concluded. $1.2 million, exactly as my grandmother had left it, minus Rebecca's very reasonable fees and a contribution I made voluntarily to a women's legal aid fund in Toronto, because I knew I had been lucky enough to have a Rebecca, and not everyone does. Donna received a letter from me, and a gift card to a restaurant in Kingston that she had mentioned once, casually, in the way that people mention things they want, but don't expect to get. I do not know if that is enough. I don't think anything is enough, actually, for someone who kept a quiet record in a notebook, just in case, because her instincts told her something was wrong, and she trusted those instincts. But it was what I could do. At the first hearing, Liam sat across the room from me for the first time since I had woken up. He looked exactly the same. That was the strangest part. I had expected him to look different, diminished somehow, but he looked exactly the same, in the same kind of suit, with the same particular way of sitting like he owned the floor beneath his feet. He looked at me, and I looked back at him, and I did not look away first. I want to be honest, I don't know if he will face criminal consequences. The OPP investigation is ongoing. Mitchell Reeves surrendered his license voluntarily before the Law Society concluded its process. Vanessa has not contacted me. I don't expect she will. What I know is this. I left the Hartwell family with every dollar my grandmother gave me, my own name back on my own accounts, and the knowledge that the 11 days I spent lying still in that hospital bed were not wasted. I had gone in as someone's wife. I had come out as myself. Some mornings, when the Ottawa light comes through Charlotte's window, she has let me stay, and I am slowly looking for my own place. I think about what would have happened if I had opened my eyes that first afternoon. If I had said something. If I had trusted that the truth would protect me. It wouldn't have. Not then. Not without the evidence. Not with Mitchell and his drafted documents and the cooperative physician waiting in the wings. Silence for 11 days was the only tool I had. I used it.